If I can just take you up on the pressure to be perfect thing, I no longer feel that. It's exhausting and it's impossible. And it leads to paralysis.
Hey, who's missing listeners? Welcome to the first episode of season 3. Whether this is your first episode ever of Who's Missing or you're coming back to us after our time off, I'm glad you're here. I'm really glad to be back. So excited to introduce you to our guest this season. Before we get to that, a couple updates. We are now publishing video clips on YouTube, so if you want to see us and listen to us, you can do so there. And new segment alert. Every month you are going to get an Ask Us Anything episode. I'm hosting with my good friend and colleague, Katie O'Malley, a fellow coach, a fellow Chicagoan. If you have questions about work, about leadership, about relationships at work, about mental health at work, you can ask us at who'smissingpodcast.com/askusanything, and we will answer. Those episodes come out the first Friday of every month, with the exception of this month. It's coming out this Friday. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. Okay, enough housekeeping. I am dying to introduce you to our fantastic first guest this season, Dr. Emma Belcher. She's the president of Plowshares Fund, which, if you haven't heard of it, it's important you do. It is a foundation that supports initiatives to prevent the spread and use of nuclear weapons and to prevent conflicts that could lead to their use. Emma has a PhD in international relations from Tufts University, and she's not only incredibly smart, she's a joy to talk to. She also has a TED Talk. You should check that out as well. We talk not only about her fascinating career revolving around nuclear weapons, look, something that we don't think about, right, every day, and we talk about imposter syndrome, which is something I think we've all thought about at some point in time and felt potentially. But why? Why have we felt it? So get ready, because this is a good one. I'm Emily Drake, and this is Who's Missing. Tell me about your morning and your day so far. It's almost 2:00 in the nation's capital.
It is indeed. I was woken up at 5 a.m. by my daughter. Mm-hmm. And I tried to get her to sleep a little bit longer. And she's like, no, I want to get up. Mummy, please. And she's crying. I'm like, oh. Mm-hmm. So we got up. We had breakfast. Called my parents, because that's like the great time to call mum and dad in Australia when, they're somewhat awake and we are normally asleep. So we had a good chat. And then, of course, I still ended up leaving the house later than I thought, even though I'd been up over an hour earlier than I needed to be. But got her off to a school. I came back and I had a nap.
Oh. Yeah.
Which I shouldn't have done. I should have gone straight into work, but I had a headache. I was tired. I'm like, I'm going to be better if I have a nap. So I did.
So you should have had a nap.
Yes.
And you did. Yeah.
And I did. I don't normally do that. I don't listen normally.
What are you noticing about you at this stage in your life and your career that you, like, in this vein of, like, I wouldn't normally do that you are now doing?
Probably trying to go to bed earlier.
Yeah.
It makes so much difference. Mm-hmm. And I'm not always good about it, but it really does help. I think I know more what I should be doing. Does it mean I do it? No.
Yeah. You know, that's painful sometimes, isn't it?
It really is.
Damn it, I know better. Damn it.
Exactly.
I'm not doing better, though. It's always, for me, interesting to hear about some of the pedestrian details of people's lives before they get into what was your first meeting today? And how do you relate to meetings at this stage in your career? What's your calendar look like?
my calendar is a little horrendous.
Yeah.
Lots of meetings, but also I try and block out time to get specific tasks done. Because if I don't put it down, it doesn't get done. Now, does that mean I'm always doing that task that's on my calendar at that time? No.
Right.
Things shift around, but at least I'm reminded of it. I know what I've got to get done. So, it's interesting you asked what my first meeting was. It was about members of our community who were working on supporting a diplomatic solution with Iran, who are getting harassed online. And these are women, people of colour, who are publicly supporting diplomacy and are getting trashed and doxed. They're getting their addresses published online. They're getting rape threats, death threats, pictures of their children online. Here's where they live, go get them kind of thing. It is horrendous. And so we're trying to find ways that we can support them. The idea is to try to silence people and make them step away from supporting what they really believe in. And you know what? It works. And it serves to stifle debate. And it's just one of those horrible things of our time, I think, right now with social media. And the fact that these people are still doing this work despite all of it. They are so courageous, they're so brave, they're so strong, but also we don't want people putting themselves in harm's way. So we're trying to figure out what can we do to support them and to support the critically important work that we're doing.
Yeah. Was it a meeting where you explored what the ideas you have on how to do that? Did you make any decisions in the meeting? Or was it really a chance for people to kind of land and just know that we're working on it? We're not maybe where we want to be, but we're working on it.
Yeah, it was a chance for us to update people on here are the things we're doing.
Yeah.
Here are the ways we think we can support you. We'll come back to you soon with a set of proposals about how we're going to tackle this going forward.
Yeah.
I think it was a way just to communicate, to show them we're still here, we're listening, we want to help, here's what we've been thinking, and just help that community. I do think that we'll have some sort of practical ways that we can support them ready for their consideration in a couple of weeks. So,
yeah, very important. You know, moments before I was logging on to talk to you and eating my cauliflower pizza, I was texting. Of course, I was texting, not memojis, but a group of friends that I have in my life for the first time what I would describe as a bullying presence. I've never had it before. 44. How did I get that far?
How did you manage?
How did I do it? 7th grade, yes, of course, my friends on the bus were like, we're not going to be friends with you anymore. But, like, no one was then an asshole. You know what I mean? It was just like teenagers being teenagers. And really, my friends had to remind me, you know, they want you to fail. They want you to quit. They won't stop until you do. And so it gets to this, you know, I know we're here today to talk about imposter syndrome, and we'll see if by the end of this conversation we rename it, because I know that's up for conversation. But, you know, it's really going the way of the peaceful warrior, the purposeful warrior, that's especially, I think, as a woman, especially, you know, when you're being bullied. What do you make of the balancing act of how you continue to do the work you do? I mean, let's talk about you, you know?
Yeah, well, I put myself in some of the women's shoes who are getting viciously attacked online, and I think, would I keep doing it? Maybe not. It's so vicious. And even if none of those threats actually materialize in the physical world, emotionally what it must do, I mean, it's got to be terrifying, draining. And what it does is it distracts you from the real work that you should be doing. And that's part of the intention as well. And so I really applaud these people who are relentless at it. But also I've made it clear too, you don't have to keep doing it. You know, it's one thing to stand up for a principle, but these are people's lives. This is happening to a group of people trying to support diplomacy with Iran. That's one issue. There are so many other issues where this is happening as well. And what I'm trying to do is find where are their partners who are trying to tackle this, to combat this, who see this as a threat really to democracy, as a threat to national security because it silences voices. Let's tackle it together, because I think if we can be working together, finding systematic approaches to this problem, we're going to be so much stronger than if we're all trying to do it separately and in our silos. I'm not out there on the front lines doing this work. So you ask, how do I keep doing it? Yeah, I experience certain challenges in my work that we can definitely dive into. But, you know, the nature and the level of some of the vile attacks right now is something that some people are experiencing and not everyone. So it's those some people that we have to really support and do what we can.
Yeah. The message around, you know, partnership and systems, you know, I think it's important, especially in your role as a leader. I think about this too, like to zoom out and kind of be up here looking at how we can support while, you know, so many of our sisters and brothers are fighting on the front line, right? So to come at it from both places. You mentioned, you have your host of challenges. I think maybe tell us a little bit about, you know, we have a sense of, okay, so Dr. Emma Belcher, her first meeting of the day was talking about some pretty serious stuff. Tell us about, you know, what you do and how you make sense of what you do.
At the moment, I'm president of Ploughshares Fund, and we are the largest foundation in the US solely focused on reducing the threat from nuclear weapons. That is sometimes a conversation stopper when I'm at a party or at a bar. There's both sometimes this look of awe and horror, and then maybe we go on to talk about something else. But, you know, it's an overwhelming issue. It's kind of abstract. It's hard to engage. And a lot of people think, surely that's something that people outside of government don't do. How could you be working on this issue? So, you know, I think unfortunately the whole threat and the idea of nuclear weapons has faded from public consciousness, right, since the end of the Cold War. Unfortunately, now it's back with a vengeance and people are thinking about it, right? We've got Putin's threat to use nuclear weapons in order to persecute his war in Ukraine. It's sort of enabled him to invade a sovereign country. And then you've got horrendous war crimes, impacts on the population, it's forced migration, and it's having an impact on food shortages in the global economy. So nuclear weapons are there. People are starting to think about them more now. We're seeing the United States, Russia, China, all with modernisation plans and a looming arms race where for the first time since the end of the Cold War, we're looking at an increase in the number of nuclear weapons rather than a decrease. So we're about to launch into this madness of an arms race all over again. And will we be so lucky this time as to avoid catastrophic escalation to nuclear war?
How do you make sense of it? Because to your point, right, people respond with awe or terror, right? And you are, among other things, the leader of this organization. You have other roles in your life. How does it feel day to day to be doing that work, you know?
Well, I think you just got to, like any big problem, break it down into pieces and tackle things in smaller bite-sized ways. But as you said, always with that kind of systemic overarching view of how do all the pieces fit together. So what we're trying to do is work on different parts of the problem, right? And there are a number of different angles. You've got like US-Russia relations and how bad they are now and the threat of a new arms race. You know, that's one thing to look at. And then we've got China increasing its number of nuclear weapons. How does that now enter into the mix? And then you've got countries like North Korea, a much smaller nuclear arsenal, but quite unpredictable, volatile. Then you have a country like Iran that has the capacity to develop a nuclear weapon if it chooses to, will it or won't it, and how does the diplomacy or other ways of interacting with Iran increase or decrease that likelihood? The thing I'm most focused on right now is how do we create a strong, healthy group of people to tackle this problem? And if you can't get a strong, healthy group of people to tackle the problem, then we're kind of ceding the decisions to the usual suspects, those deep inside governments who are making decisions that affect all of us on our behalf. And I really believe it's so important to have a thriving civil society outside government that can ask questions and that can point to where governments are getting it wrong, and who can take the time to delve into these complex problems and come up with solutions to propose to government officials who are really busy, slammed with a whole lot of things. Those officials can take these ideas from outside and try to incorporate them into their daily work, all with the aim of reducing nuclear risk, hoping that we never have nuclear weapons use again. And eventually, if we could do it, if we could imagine it, a world where we're guaranteeing security, but without needing to threaten the use of these horrendous weapons.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a really small group of people working on this problem. It's kind of shocking, right? To say we've got an existential problem and we don't have many people working on it. There's not much funding to work on this issue. In the nuclear weapons civil society space, there might be around 30 million-ish a year right now. There aren't as many funders in the space. When you look at the climate change crisis, another existential threat, it's sort of orders of magnitude much more in terms of billions of dollars that are spent on this threat. Part of what I see my role as to try to bolster the group of people working on the problem, attract more people with diverse backgrounds, experiences, disciplines to tackle this problem, do problem solving, and create a community of practitioners who are nice to each other, because they're not all nice to each other right now, that are resilient, adaptable, creative, and really inspirational, so that we can provide the type of solutions, we can raise awareness, we can provide public support and pressure for politicians to make the right decisions that are going to keep us all safe.
I think if you are interested in building resilient, capable, nice, sort of kind practitioners who are healthy and strong to stay in this conversation, I met you I don't want to say a couple lives ago, a couple roles ago.
Right, yes.
And, got to know you over the course of doing some work with the MacArthur Foundation, your former employer. We're here to talk about this systemic noise that says, shh, right? Especially to women.
Yep.
And especially to women in the world of STEM. And especially to women, non-white women, right? All of these categories. Yep. And I just had this experience of go on, yes, 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 feeling myself getting excited about something that I don't think about. So I want you to know that, that, just witnessing you in your confidence around it. What was your experience? What did you feel?
In talking about that? First off, thanks for saying that, because sometimes we can feel like we're saying things and it goes into a void, particularly at a time where you're thinking about, what do I think I need to do? You're putting pieces in place and you're talking about what you want to do and you've embarked on it in various ways, but you're not there yet. And you haven't gone far enough really to know, is this working? So I guess I've got a hypothesis right now that I'm working with, right? If we can increase and improve the strength of the field of people working on this through XYZ, then we will have better nuclear policy and then we'll have a safer, more secure world. That is something that I think we often rush to. What's the solution to fix the problem in terms of what's the policy idea? Where do we get it from? Rather than actually thinking about how are we trying to find that idea? What are the conditions we're creating in order for that idea to rise to the surface? And so actually focusing on that part doesn't always seem as interesting, or you can't say that's the solution. It's going to take some time. It's going to take experimentation, and it's going to kind of keep us on this path, adjusting and adapting as we learn. But maybe in 10 years, we'll be able to look back and say, what we started then was really successful. And that's what excites me. But we're not there yet. And trying to make that argument and convince people this is the right thing to do, it is a little harder because it's not as flashy or as sexy. But I firmly believe it's absolutely what we need right now. And so that's what I'm going to keep working for. When I look over my career and I think about the different phases of it, or the lives, as you said, right? yeah, my MacArthur life was a life before this one. But I think it helped set me up for the life that I'm living now. So I'm so grateful for it. And actually, I got to give you a shout out. I mean, I'm so grateful for the work we did together and the way that I then started to feel more of that power, I guess, right? Like, okay, I see what needs to be done, how we could do it. But it's a lot of hard work. It's long work. It's intentional work. I'm really thrilled where I am now because I feel as though I can start to put into place some of the kind of structures that I think that I've witnessed being broken. Now I'm in a position to try to address it. And that's terrific. So
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Great. I can tell. I love when I get a clear call to action, and Dr. Emma Belcher did just that on this episode. This week's spotlight is on N, the letter N, square. And square brings new energy and a fresh approach to tackling one of the world's wickedest problems, the deepening threat posed by nuclear weapons. They come up with new ideas, new solutions, and new partnerships that honor all of the complexities of the nuclear landscape, some of which we learned about from Emma in this episode. So to learn more and to get involved and to get the conversation started and continuing in your life, visit www.nsquare.org. So in this seat that you're literally sitting in right now, what's your relationship like with the feeling of I'm in the right seat? And let me say, like, as a follow-on to that, I deserve to be in this seat.
When I was first approached about the job, I thought, oh, there's no way. What? You want me be the president of Plowshares? Like, really? And I needed a little bit of convincing, actually, that this was something that I should go for. Boy, am I glad I did. I decided to put my head in the ring for the president position, and I started the interviews, and I happened to be pregnant at the time. And I thought, let's just see how this goes. And, I'll tell them at the appropriate time and all the rest. So go through the rounds of interviews, and then I'd heard the next interview is going to be in December. And I hadn't really heard. And so I reached out because I had to say, look, just so you know, I'm due to give birth in January. So it might be good to do the interview before that happens. And so, they said, oh, okay, well, congratulations, which was a great response, perfectly the right one. I'm not sure if that's what they were kind of thinking, but no. I think they were. Knowing them now, I'm sure it was just the feeling of congratulations. And so we ended up going through the interview process, and they said, look, if you're still in it, we'll wait till after you've had the baby and blah, 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 we'll come back. So I have my daughter in January 2020, which at the time I didn't realise what was ahead, as no one did. But when she was 6 weeks old, I had the next interview. And I remember not feeling myself. My world was completely upside down. I was sleep deprived. My body was achy. I remember kind of sitting there at the Zoom thing. I dragged myself to sit there, and I'm doing the interview, and it goes well. And they said, well, we would love to invite you out to San Francisco to meet with the board in person. I said, oh, okay. And then I remember at the time talking to my mum. So she'd come over for the birth of my daughter and was really fabulously supportive. Dad came out too, but he had to go back. And Mum was there, and she was really helping out. And she actually, to be honest, wasn't in favour of me applying for the job. She said, Emma, you've just had a child. You've just moved house. This would be a job in a different city without a support network. At this point in your career and your life with your daughter, you've got to keep everything stable and don't be taking on more than you can, And I remember thinking, I can't ask Mum to look after her while I fly out to California for an interview. And I don't physically feel I can fly for an interview. I thought, if I can't fly out for an interview, how on earth can I be the president of Plowshares and run an organisation? So I withdrew from consideration. I then get a call from the board chair, wonderful woman, Terry Gamble-Boyer, and she said, look, we're really enjoying the discussion with you. Just stay in the conversation, see how you feel. I understand you're a new mother. She said, I want to let you know you will sleep again. She said, I've been there. I mean, this is getting me choked up. It was just, it was what I needed to hear. She said, we really want to keep talking. So she said, don't come out to San Francisco. Let's do the call over Zoom. She said, there's this virus we're all hearing about. We probably shouldn't be traveling anyhow, so we'll do Zoom. She said to me, look, if we offer you the position, don't feel as though you have to start right away. Take several months off, be with your daughter, and then start. And she said, we have a women's initiative at Plowshares, and if we can't support a new mother, what the hell are we doing? That alone convinced me that this is the job that I wanted. And they were so gracious and wonderful and supportive. And I guess I just thought this is a real demonstration of support, understanding of the challenges women sometimes face in the field. And for me, it was an affirmation that I did deserve to be there, that they were willing to put that in. I'd be lying if I said that when I took the helm, I was like all any kind of sense of doubt flitted away. That's not how it worked, right? So obviously I've been in those positions where you think, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? How did I get here? Do I deserve to be here? All of that. But to have such support from leadership and to have such a supportive staff has just been amazing. So I feel really good about where I am.
When I work with clients and we talk about imposter syndrome, we talk a lot about the problem of it, and I get that. We want to define it right as like this, I don't deserve to be here. There is no amount of sort of external validation I can get to feel like I belong. And what's happening, and you and I have talked about this, is we're starting to switch the script on this too, right? The bully is the problem, not the person who's being bullied, right? The system is the problem, not the woman who's in the seat. And Terry, I mean, shout out to Terry. What an example of what I think and I witness, like women really like stepping up to say, I'm going to help you step forward. And hopefully, like if we can help each other, it'll be modeled for the rest of the organization. And this is what we're going to be doing because it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds to me, if I know you, that this is something that you're working on behalf of others now to help with, right? And I'm just wondering if you have an example, you tell such beautiful stories, about what it's like to be the president of Plowshares and to see maybe women or people in general struggling with like, I don't belong or how to speak up and helping them do that.
When I think about my own experience, we've all come through the pandemic experiencing having to work, look after children, look after elderly family members, do a lot of things at once. And it's become so much more visible. I've had the experience of, when my daughter's homesick from school, having important meetings I've still got to do. And, she's a toddler. She's getting better. I can now put her in front of screens. Thank goodness for screens. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that, but, when you need to get something done. But, before that, I remember I had this important call with a senior government official. We'd pulled together the call and we had brought some other people to come and have this conversation. And I knew I couldn't cancel it. And so I just decided, all right, I'm going to do the call. I've got my daughter here. And I was upfront about that from the beginning. And I said, just letting you know, my daughter's here sick and we might get interrupted. And pretty much on cue, over she comes and she peers into the screen and she's waving at everybody. And the government official was so fabulous. And he said, oh, welcome. It's lovely to see you. And I'm sure you're going to have far better questions than anyone else on the call. A very welcoming, we understand, it's all okay. And what was so interesting is that after that point, I started to notice a couple of the other women on the call turned on their cameras and they were sitting there with children themselves. And so I just thought, if I can demonstrate that, this is life, this doesn't mean I can't do my job, and that making it visible, the things that we're all dealing with, and making other women feel that it's okay to talk about or to show that they've got children too, or they've got something else that they need to be doing. That's where I see I can kind of help a little bit just by example.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the field, because I think this is such a unique opportunity to hear from someone in senior leadership and arguably, I'm assuming, a male-dominated field.
You would be right with that assumption, Emily.
Yeah. By the way, to be clear, what field are we talking about?
we've grappled with this a little bit ourselves.
Have you?
Right. So, writ large, it's a field of people that work on nuclear weapons issues, right?
Yeah.
But where we come from at Ploughshares is our firm belief that the way you reduce nuclear risk is by decreasing the number of nuclear weapons, by dialogue and diplomacy to address those problems.
Yep.
And this relates to arms control, reductions, disarmament, eventual elimination if we could. A lot of people call that a naive goal to have, to eliminate nuclear weapons. They say it'll never happen, but I think it will never happen if we don't try and imagine how we get to a place where we can guarantee peace and security without these weapons. So our general approach, the way we're looking at defining our field and the people we want to support, is anyone who's focused on reducing threat through this sort of reduction approach and through diplomatic approaches to solutions. So that's how we're defining it. You were right when you described it's very, and it has been traditionally very white male dominated. A lot of the decision making is hidden from the public, and it's very hard to break in to this world of nuclear weapons policy. And that's what makes its status quo really hard to change. It's very hard to challenge. People who do challenge it are subjected to all sorts of nasty behaviour, particularly when it's women and younger women and women of colour in the field who are doing that. That applies not just to the powers within government, deep inside the Pentagon, but it also relates to the field of people outside civil society and the people that I work with on a daily basis. It is a problem. I think it's changing. But it's a problem that I'm not going to pretend it's unique to the nuclear field, right? So we see all sorts of dynamics that relate sort of worldwide. So meetings where women are spoken over in meetings, ideas that women initially voice at meetings are ignored. And then when a man says it, oh, what a brilliant idea. There's condescension, there's dismissal of ideas without actually listening. And there are also attacks on the person rather than the idea. And all of this really serves to send a signal that we're not welcome. And it happens particularly to younger people and people of colour in the field. And it's, here I am, the leader of an organisation, I'm a woman, and I'm getting this kind of treatment as well. If this is happening publicly to me, you can't imagine what's happening to other more junior people in other parts of the field where it's not seen. I know this is common to other fields, but this particular nuclear field, because it is so small, it's particularly problematic. And I hear this from outsiders that we try to bring in to help bust things open and solve problems, is they are treated terribly. There's a disdain from someone from the outside. There's a, you don't understand, this is, you're not smart enough, all of this kind of stuff. So you hear this from people that it's a particularly damaging, toxic place to work.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, right? And you said, talk about problems, but what's the solution, right? Thankfully, I think there is one. And that's what we're really focused on. We are focused on trying to create that healthy, safe, vibrant space for people to work in order that we come up with better ideas and attract others who want to join and help. Yeah. We now, in all of the spaces that we work in as Ploughshares, if you're attending our meetings, if you're on our listservs, there's a code of conduct we've created that you have to adhere to. We also do a lot of norm setting at the beginning of meetings and generating it with the group we're with. We're not just saying, hey, here are the norms. We're saying, how do people feel about what we think the norms should be? And what that then does is once everyone agrees, it allows you to be able to call out the sort of problematic behaviour as you see it. Now, there's a lot of debate between the call-out, call-in culture, and I'm such a fan of Loretta Ross's concept of this and the work that she's doing at Smith College. For us, it's thinking about, right, when is it appropriate to do the call-out and when is the call-in much more effective? Being able to say, here are the norms and then here is objectively the violation really helps kind of make this mean something. And I think maybe I was a little naive at first and I thought, all right, we have a code of conduct, then everyone's going to adhere to it because it'll be obvious if you're not doing it.
Right.
Wrong.
Wrong.
Wrong. And I think it shouldn't be surprising, right? These are patterns of behaviour that have been built up and tolerated and allowed and in some cases rewarded over a long period of time. So it's going to take a while for that to change, to get unlearned and adapted. We've got to be able to find those appropriate ways of holding people to account. This is where the call in, call out comes in. Because on the one hand, you don't want to publicly humiliate someone in a way that it makes them retract from the conversation. You still want them to be part of the conversation. You value their expertise. You don't want to shut them off. That could be really damaging, right? And because when we talk about diversity of ideas being so important to do problem solvings, we really mean you don't want to end up in a room just with everybody who agrees with you. So do we do that public call out, or is that going to make them retract? Or by not doing a public call out, are we letting down the others in the room who see the violation and think that nothing is happening? There's no accountability. This is yet another one of those unsafe spaces where nothing's going to change. And I think what I'm really heartened by is to see the younger people who are really sort of saying, I want to see this and I want to take action. It's not good enough. I think for a number of us, you know, Gen Xers and whatever, it's something we've grown up with, we've tolerated, and we might have complained about to our girlfriends. But I see younger people today who are having the courage to speak up and to demand better. And in turn, that's giving me the courage to do what I know I have to do. So I think we're all kind of in this together, and we've got work to do, but I think it's vitally important if we're ever going to solve these problems.
Well, and I appreciate in all that you've shared with us about how there is, I mean, of course there's a problem. And I'm one of these people who, my anxiety, I think, moves me to solve pretty quickly. Like, I like to move to action. I'm not someone who sits on things. It's like I'm a very sort of leaning forward kind of person. What I hear you saying is that, you know, the solution is a dance. It's certainly action, intentional action, right? And so when I hear people say, like, the pressure to be perfect at work, or like I have to appear a certain way, or I have to, when I think about all the have tos, I think about how heavy that feels and how hard it is then to call out or call in. Like, you're not present. You can't be intentional. You're just so wrapped up in your head. So what I hear, it's up to the environment and the system to create a space and model it. This is what will and won't be tolerated here based on a set of values we have.
Yep, absolutely.
And that shit ain't easy. I mean, every time you set a boundary, you're going to piss people off, right? And here we are, still at this work, right?
And I think pissing people off is then knowing that you're actually changing something.
Yes.
So that's maybe a positive way to put it. And if I can just take you up on the pressure to be perfect thing.
Yes, please.
I no longer feel that. It's exhausting.
Me
and
either.
it's impossible. And it leads to paralysis, right? And I'm thinking about all the things I've kind of got to get done. And if I focus too much on trying to get this one thing perfect, everything else is going to who knows what. And so I actually don't feel that anymore. I feel pressure to do my job well, with integrity, to be fair, and to have impact.
Yeah.
And I think the way to do that is dispense with trying to be perfect, because it doesn't work. You know, there's that old kind of overused kind of saying, the perfect is the enemy of the good. But it's old and overused for a reason, because it's true.
Right. You've shared some really practical things, I think, you know, that you have to, for your own self, according to your values, decide when you're going to call something out, call something in. It sounds like you've come up with a way to make that decision. As we look at the rest of 2023 and we think about dismantling all these systems, and I think you and I are both like, imposter syndrome is not about you being perfect or getting it right or arriving at a place. It is about a system that's designed for you to feel like you don't belong, and you better hustle so you can be one of us.
Yep.
What are sort of your, if you want to say like some parting words or final thoughts on like what someone listening who might be feeling like I don't belong somewhere might do or find or seek out? Any thoughts on that? What's worked for you?
Yeah,
even?
I think sometimes when you start to realize there are so many other people having that thought or feeling, maybe in a meeting you're in, and you realize this can't just be me, right? It's the system, as you said. And, you know, when you first talked to me about, let's talk about imposter syndrome, I was like, yeah, great. You know, I've certainly felt that and I've experienced it. And then you really gently suggested that, I go and listen or watch a video of Resma Sojani's Smith College commencement. So everybody listening is going to go and listen to it. I won't do it justice. She gives a fabulous historical example of, something else that was created as a kind of a scheme in response to women's progress. So she basically says that imposter syndrome is a scheme and that it's intended to make women think that there's something wrong with us that we've got to change. But what she says is, the reality is that in some of these situations we're in, it's not necessarily imposter syndrome, it's just normal human anxiety and discomfort at the situation. And when I heard that, I thought, that's absolutely right. I mean, there is a reason in professional settings you might show up, maybe you're early in your career, you've just graduated, and you're in the presence of all these people who've been working there for a while. You might feel a bit anxious and a bit of discomfort. But what you've got to know is that as we know more about how we get to better solutions and decision making, it's by drawing on all lived experiences, all backgrounds, all approaches to problems. And being a newcomer to the field, whatever field you're in, you are going to have a critically unique perspective that others in the field need to hear. You need to be able to ask those questions you might think are silly, because I can't tell you how many times someone who doesn't understand nuclear weapons will say, well, why do you do that? And I've thought, oh, why do we do that? That is ridiculous. And the answer that, because we've always done it that way, isn't good enough, right? So I think I'd encourage people to recognise, if they feel like that it could be just a normal human response to the situation they're in. Know that so many others are thinking that. I think in the speech, Sojani sort of said something about, like, when more than 80% of women feel this, we know it's not a syndrome. It's something that's about the system that you're in. And I think one final thought on her speech, which I thought was brilliant, and, I shared it with a friend, as you do with so many things. You're like, wow, this is fantastic. You've got to, listen to it. And she then shared it with her daughter. But she said something to me that I thought was really wise. And she said, but isn't knowing that imposter syndrome is a thing something that empowers us to know it's not me, it's the system? And so I don't know that I would completely dispense with getting rid of the term, but it might be what we do with that term and our reaction to the phenomenon that then moves us to action. Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Like, what are we working for? What are we working against? There's all these things, right? But knowing the players, and that there is, it's out there and people still talk about it and talk about it being a problem, but that's not what we were here to do today. We were here to talk about, what are we going to do instead, right? In spite of.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope that, this episode lands on the ears of many young people, and really just to say, let's talk about imposter syndrome. We can. And here's what I understand it to be. Here's how I've experienced my own growth and confidence, and sort of, I think, give it less power, right?
Absolutely.
That's the goal.
Absolutely. So to the teenagers who listen, what I'd love to say is, come and help us solve the problem of nuclear weapons. Figure out where it relates to you, what you're concerned about. Figure out the connections between climate change, racial justice, other issues of equity, and come join us. I first came to this issue as a 14-year-old when I was taught about nuclear weapons, and I was like mortified, but I had a kind of fascination at the same time, right? How could we create our own destruction willingly? You could destroy civilization times over, and our solution is to both the US and the Soviet Union to threaten each other with mutually assured destruction that relies on everyone behaving rationally. It's madness. So anyhow, it was that fascination, maybe a morbid fascination and a curiosity, that got me into this field. And we need more help from more teenagers, because we haven't fixed it.
Yeah. All right. You heard it here. Emma, Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. This was a great discussion, much more energizing than talking about the typical what's going on in the world, because it can feel overwhelming and, oh my goodness, but real kind of practical things we can do, but just the energy behind it. So thanks so much for inviting me on and letting me speak about all the stuff I'm doing now.
My pleasure, friend. Really good to see you. You know, I always love talking to and finding common ground with people that do something so radically different than I do. And yet we can always find similarities. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and feel free to follow us on social if you want more content and more community at Who's Missing Podcast. Talk to you soon.